Welcome Year 4 to your third session in our statistics unit of maths for this week. Now we're going to be thinking about line graphs this week, and this is new learning for us. So we're going to just start, we're going to take it nice and slowly. We're going to look at a couple of examples. I think we've got about 3 or 4 questions to look at together. And then tomorrow's session, or session 4, there isn't going to be a video for that because it's just more practice at looking at line graphs and interpreting line graphs, reading them and finding the answers, and then representing data on line graphs, so drawing the data in. So we're going to look at all those things today in session 3, and then session 4, there isn't going to be a video, you're just going to have a go at the worksheet yourselves. So let's get going. So line graphs are used to show changes over time. So they show continuous data. And this line graph here shows the temperature of a classroom over the period of maybe a day or a week, okay? So the data being measured is shown on the vertical axis, the y-axis, and the data that's being measured here is the temperature. And the time is always shown on the horizontal axis, on the x-axis. So we're going to have to interpret, we're going to have to look at and use that to answer questions. And then we're going to have to represent data. We're going to have to add our data to a line graph. Okay, so we've got 2 different things that we're going to look at today. So let's have a look at the first line graph. So here's a line graph, and this shows the growth of some cress over 10 days, okay? So we're looking at how much some cress has grown over 10 days. I've been a bit sneaky. I've changed parts of the question because I didn't want to do the questions with you. I wanted you to have a look at an example, and then I wanted you to have a go at the real question. So starting again by looking at the scale on the vertical axis. It's always important when we're looking at graphs on the x-axis. We can see that the scale is in centimetres, and it's telling us the height of the crest. So it starts at 0 centimetres, then we've got 2 centimetres, 4 centimetres, 6 centimetres, 8, 10, and all the way up to 20 centimetres. So we've checked out the scale. But it's also useful on this one to check out the scale on the x-axis as well, because that tells us the number of days. Now I can see we've got 0 days, we've got 2 days, 4 days, 6 days, 8 days and 10 days. But I can also see there's a gap, there's a little increment in between the 0 and the 2. And I wonder what that would be. So we've got to find out how tall the crest was on day 4. So we're going to look at the day on the x-axis. There's day 4, and we're going to move up with our finger or a pencil till we reach that little cross, and that is the cross that tells us that that's how tall the crest was. And we can see, if we then go along and read off the vertical axis, we can see it's 6 centimetres. Okay. Now the next question doesn't ask us how tall the crest was on day 4. We want to know this time what day the crest reached 10 centimetres. So we're going to have to start on that vertical axis. We're going to have to start at the 10 centimetres this time. Move along until we find the little X. That plots the point. That tells us that the crest reached 10 centimetres on day 6. So it would be day 6. And then it says estimate. And we know that estimate means have a good guess at it, have a go from what you know. So we've got to estimate the height of the crest on day 3. Well, I can't see a day 3 on my scale, but I know if I was counting that 3 would come between 2 and 4. So day 3 is going to be there. And if we go up this time, we can see that there isn't a little cross there. So we weren't plotting a point on that day. And we can see it's between the 4 and the 6. And I know that if I'm counting, I count 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we could estimate that it was at 5 centimetres. Okay. It's the same graph, just another question. So we've got to do it again. We've got to estimate when the crest will reach a height of 8 centimetres. So we're going to do the opposite, just like we did before. We're going to find our 8 centimetres. We're going to move across. We can't see a little cross there, so we've got to have a good guess. We've got to estimate. And I've got day 4 and day 6. And my point comes in between those 2 days. So I know that when I'm counting, I count 4, 5, 6. Now, consecutive days. So the word consecutive means days that are next to each other. So for example, day 1 and day 2 would be consecutive days. Day 6 and day 7 would be consecutive days. All right, so day 0 and day 1 would be 2 consecutive days. So our question is asking us to think about, just popping some examples down there for you, thinking about between which 2 days. So you need to have a look at how the graph has changed, the speed that it's gone up in. Right, moving swiftly on then. So this graph shows the distance a cyclist travelled on a bike ride. So the distance we can see is in miles this time. We haven't got a scale. Well, we've got the start and the end of a scale, and you've got to fill it in this time before we can get started. And the same with the time. We've got a 0 and we've got a 10. So we're going to have to work out this time what those increments are for both the distance cycled and the time taken. Now, where can I start this? It's always a good question to think about when you're posed with a problem. And I think we're going to have to look at these scales because we've got a starting point and we've got an end point. We've got to fill the bit in between. Okay. So I can see that the distance travelled starts at 0 and goes all the way up to 30 on the scale. But I've got to find out what those little increments are in between. Now, I know it can't be 1 because that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's not 6 there, it's 30. So what could each of those increments be? I could try 2. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. That's still not right. Maybe I'd try 3 next. So it's going to be a little bit of trial and error here to try and work out what the scale is. And the same for the time taken in hours. I could try 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but I've got to get to 10, so I know 1 isn't right, so it's not in 1 hour increments, not in 1 hour segments or sections. So that's going to be a starting point for that one. So question 3, this is where we are going to have to record some data. Okay, so we've got a table, and the table shows us the temperature outside on a Monday. So we've got the time that the temperature was taken and the actual temperature. So the temperature is in degrees Celsius and the time we can see is in digital time. So 0900, 10, 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the afternoon using the 24-hour clock. So we're going to have to use that table to plot the data. Okay, so let's have a look at how we do that. So I've got all my axes, they're all labelled up. I can see that I've got a bit of a scale there. And I'm going to start at 9 o'clock with this Monday. And I can see that at 9 o'clock on Monday, the temperature was 14 degrees. So I'm going to find my 9 o'clock point and I'm going to go up to 14 and I'm going to mark it with my X. That shows my data point, my point that I'm plotting on my line graph. Just going to rub out that little bit because I don't want us to get confused. So I'm going to get rid of that. Oh, I've got rid of half of my cross as well, so I'm going to have to pop that back in. There we go. So that's my first point that's been plotted on the graph. Now I'm going to look at 10 o'clock. So I can see the time along the bottom and I can see the 10 o'clock point. And at 10 o'clock, the temperature was 16. So I'm going to go up. I'm going to move across to find the 16 and I'm going to plot my next point. Doesn't look much like a line graph at the moment. I'm just at the moment plotting points. Okay, so I've got 2 points. Now I'm going to look at 11 o'clock and I'm going to go up to 20 degrees because that's what the temperature was at 11 o'clock, and I'm going to put my next point. So the first job is to plot all those points in your table. I'm not going to do any more. I'm going to stop there because I don't want to do it all for you. And then what you have to do is you have to join the points up using a ruler to form your line graph. So here's my line graph. There's your start. I want you to keep adding that data. So you might have to pause at this point and keep adding the data. The next part of the question is talking about Tuesday. So the data that we've already plotted is for Monday, and now we're going to think about what the temperature is like at different times on Tuesday. And it's asking us to think about the time again and think about the temperature. So that hasn't changed. It's exactly the same on this graph. But we've got to add the new information using a different colour. And then it says complete the key. So the key for Monday is purple. I've used a purple line. And for Tuesday, I'm going to use pink. So you're going to need to use 2 different colours. So I can see at 9 o'clock on Tuesday, the temperature was 13 degrees. So that's 1 degree less than it was on Monday. So again, I'm going to find my point, my 9 o'clock. I'm going to plot, because I know between 12 and 14, that would be 13. I'm going to do the same for 10 o'clock, and I'm going to do the same for 11 o'clock. But I'm going to join those points up with a pink. So now I'm able to compare Monday with Tuesday. So you need to complete the line graph using all the data in the table. So that's your introduction to line graphs. What I've done is on the Google Drive, I've put some graph paper in there for you, some squared paper, if you want to use that, because it's really helpful. So you might need some of that to complete your graphs with. And then, like I said, for session 4, I'm not going to do a video for session 4 because session 4 is just about practicing with line graphs. So really looking forward, Miss O'Donnell, Mrs. Parker and I are really looking forward to seeing all your fantastic maths work this week. So make sure you send it to us on the Year 4 email, and I'll see you next week. I think next week we're going to be looking at 2D shape for maths. So have fun with your maths this week, and I'll see you next week for some shape. Bye!